Chapter 2.2. This is a lot about different types of graphs, so I'm going to have most of them already pre-drawn, and I'm just going to talk through them. The first part goes through some definition of good graphs. There's a really good example that you can follow on page 62, number 11 in your book. This is what we're going to go over right here. It's talking about crime rates in Hawaii, and I've listed what it gives. And this is per 100,000 people or population in Hawaii. So 2.6 means there's 2.6 murders for every 100,000 people. So the first thing that we would do is create a bar graph. Now, we created histograms in the last section, which were bar graphs, but those were bar graphs that touched. And the horizontal axis was a quantitative value in that case. Now we're looking at qualitative, meaning they are non-numerical. So if you'll notice here, the horizontal axis is the different types of crimes, and it's important that you always label your axes. And here they are: murder, rape, robbery, house burglary, vehicle theft, and assault. And then over here on our vertical axis, we have the rate per 100,000 people. So if you'll notice, I created a bar. Now notice in these are not touching now, and that again is because we have a qualitative or non-numerical value here. And then for each bar, I have placed the value above it, which the book doesn't always do that. You won't always see that, but I think it is a good thing to do. And then at the bottom of this, always title. If you'll remember in the last section, I quit titling it. I mentioned it, but I didn't write it, so I pre-wrote it in all of these because I really wanted to stress, be sure that you title all of your graphs. At the bottom of this page of notes, I've just given several bullet points of a bar graph, so be sure and go through those. Then the next type of graph that is discussed, in this chapter is a Pareto chart. Now, a Pareto chart is also a bar graph, but it has more specifics. It puts the tallest bar on the left, and then it decreases as it goes to the right. There's a good example to follow, page 56 in your book. If you'll look over that guided exercise, it gives you a good example of data and how they've created a Pareto chart. Now, what I've done in this next graph is taken the crime in Hawaii that we just looked at, but have recreated the bar graph as a Pareto. So if you'll notice, these are still your crimes down here. It's just that these bars have switched because you want the tallest on the far left, and it decreases as it goes to the right. Now, notice my axes, although I forgot to write crime here. My axes are both labeled, and I have the title. Now, one of the things we talked about in the last section was your different types of distribution shapes. So if you don't recall what those are, be sure and review those in your book. But a Pareto chart takes on always, it is skewed right. And that would mean that it goes from the tallest bar and it kind of tapers off as you go to the right. So that is a Pareto chart. Now, most of you all have seen a circle graph, or also known as a pie chart. A couple of the things, this creates wedges or pie pieces. The total of it represents 100% of the data. And a good characteristic to always remember is your categories cannot overlap. So if your categories overlap in any way, then a circle graph is not the graph to use. Now, on page 57, if you'll follow guided exercise number 3, it goes through, it gives you data values, and then how to create the percents on that. So it's a good example in your book. Now, this example, which is from the homework section that I've actually created here, one big difference in this one is the percentages were already given. In that guided exercise that I just pointed out, the percents are not given. You have to find the percents and then create the circle graph. In this example, the percents were given. I've listed those over here. I have a title, my somewhat of a circle, free-handed. And then I've approximated the percents. Obviously, I'm a little off because that's bigger than a 6%. I'm pretty flexible with that as long as it makes sense. Don't have a pie piece here and put 68%. That doesn't even make sense. So I've done a little rough draft. Be sure that you label the percents and you also label what each pie piece represents. So that is your circle graph or your pie chart. Then the last type of graph that is given in 2.2 is what is called the time series graph. Okay, so this is a line graph. Data is plotted in order of occurrence at regular intervals. So again, a good example to look at in your book is on page 58, example number 5. It gives your data and it shows you how to create that time series graph. Or actually, I'm sorry, this is with this data here. My bad. So, okay. So, in your book, page 58, example 5, there is a time series graph example in your book in the section that you can follow. All right, in example 5 on page 58, we have the air pollution index API in Denver. So we're given day 1 through day 7, and this is your API. Okay, so, and now that I backtrack again, I think this is a different example, and then this is my example. Sorry for the confusion. They're both good examples if I could get it straight. Okay, trying to move this up. So if you'll notice here, my horizontal axis is my days. So I have day 1 through day 7. And then I have my API, which is the air pollution index. And the largest number given was 5.3, so I just went by intervals of 1. Then day 1 was 1.7, so here's day 1, and I went up 1.7. Day 2, I went up 2.4, and so on. And then to complete this, I would connect my dots. And that's your time series graph. And then at the bottom of this page of notes, it gives some bullet points of characteristics that you need to be aware of with the time series. Please let me know if you have any questions. I know I kind of went back and forth right there at the end. Example 5 on page 58 is an individual example that's different from what I showed in notes. And then the API is one that is just given in notes. But if you have any confusion or questions, feel free to email me. Thanks. Oh, chapter 2.2.